Lin Ruoxi stood in front of the iron gate of the Lin family garden, looking up at the big and cold building, and her heart felt like she was being pressed by something heavy, unable to breathe. The walls of the garden were filled with ivy, and it looked like a green barrier from a distance, unable to hide the chill that was revealed inside. The security guard at the door glanced at her, with no temperature in his eyes, as if he had been keen on this kind of scene for a long time. She tightened the trunk in her hand, and her palms were sweating, but she still walked in with her head hard. This place was built 100 years ago by the ancestors of the Lin family. It is rich and grand on the surface, but it looks like a huge mist inside. Every corridor and every room seems to have some unknown secrets hidden. Ruoxi grew up in an ordinary small city area, and her biggest house was the 3-bedroom apartment she rented before the bankruptcy of her father's company. How could she have seen such a battle? But now, she wants to live in as a young lady and become part of this family, although this identity is a contract. She also remembered that 3 days ago, in the old rental house, her father was sitting on the sofa, buried in her hands, and the sound of the sand seemed to be 10 years old. Ruoxi, Dad, I'm sorry for you. The company is gone, the debtor goes to the door every day, and our family really has no way out. The Lin family proposed that as long as you agree to this marriage, they will help us get a debt and the money that can treat your mother. He said. His eyes were red, but Ruoxi only felt that his heart was clear. She knew that how could such a rich door as the Lin family help others in vain? This marriage is just a deal. But does she have a choice? No. My mother could not afford to be sick, and her father's debt was like a mountain that made her breathless. She gritted her teeth and signed the thick contract book, which was clearly written. She had to marry Tingchen, the real master of the Lin family, to become his wife, but the marriage was unrealistic and purely to meet certain needs within the family. What exactly is needed is not written on the contract, and Ruoxi didn't ask either. She knew, and it would be useless if she asked. Miss Lin, please do hear. A middle-aged man in black suit left, and his politeness was too important, but he was not a little sincere. He is the housekeeper of the Lin family, named Uncle Zhang, and he just met her at the door. Ruoxi clicked a little and followed him through the vestibule of the garden. The stone road under her feet was as flat as if she had just passed, but every step she took, she felt as if she was stepping on the tip of a knife. When I entered the main house, I was approaching me with a huge crystal sling, which made the entire space dazzlingly bright. The marble floor is radiant, and there are a few oil paintings hanging on the walls on both sides, which look like the handwriting of a certain master, but Ruoxi is not in the mood to appreciate these. She only felt that the place was cold, so cold that it made people's bones feel cold. Mrs. Young Master, please wait here first. Young Master is handling the matter in the book room. You will come down to see you later. Uncle Zhang said, signaling her to sit on the sofa beside her. Ruoxi clicked a little, sat down, and the suitcase in her hand was not open, as if she was grabbing the last thing she belonged to. She looked down at her denim trousers and white t-shirts, feeling that she was out of place, as if she had missed her own world. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the footsteps finally came from the entrance of the stairs. Ruoxi looked up and his heartbeat couldn't help but speed up a few points. The person was wearing a dark suit and was tall and straight. The lines on his face seemed to be carved from a knife, so cold and hard that people dared not look directly. When his eyes swept over, Ruoxi felt as if she had been stabbed by something and felt uncomfortable. This is Gu Tingchen, the owner of the Lin family, and her name husband. Lin Ruoxi? His voice was low, and he felt a little impatient, as if he was not interested in looking at her more. Ruoxi stood up, clicked a little, and tried her best to make herself look less tight. It's me. He didn't say anything anymore, but just looked her up and down, with no temperature in his eyes, as if he was looking at an object he had just bought back, not a living person. Ruoxi was a little furious when he saw it, but she still held her head hard and didn't look down. She knew that from today on, she would have to learn to survive in this environment and not show any timidity. Uncle Zhang must have told you about the contract. Gu Tingchen finally opened his mouth, his temperament as if he was talking about a business. You just need to do the superficial things, and other things, don't ask, don't touch them. Understand? Ruoxi's heart sank, but he still pointed, I understand. He didn't say anything more, and turned around and prepared to go upstairs, as if he didn't plan to talk to her more. But at this moment, a crisp sound of high heels came from the door, and then a woman in a white dress walked in. She looked over 20 years old, and she was gentle and gentle. When she smiled like a spring breeze, Ruoxi couldn't help but feel something hidden in this smile. Brother Tingchen, the new sister-in-law is here, why don't you introduce it? The woman walked over with a smile, as if she was very familiar with Tingchen. She turned her head and looked at Ruoxi, with a cold voice that was hard to detect in her eyes. You are Ruoxi, right? I am Lin Manting, Tingchen's cousin, and we will be a family in the future. Ruoxi smiled hard and pointed at the head, hello. But she wondered in her heart that this woman looked as gentle as water, but her eyes were not simple no matter how she looked. Especially when she looked at Tingchen, there was a sense of possessiveness in her eyes, which made Ruoxi feel uncomfortable. Manting, don't be so arrogant. Gu Tingchen glanced at his eyebrows, his lingering voice was not a bit grudge, but he didn't say much. He turned to Uncle Zhang and said, take her to the room. Then he went upstairs without going back to the floor, as if he didn't want to stay for a second more. Uncle Zhang clicked his head and signaled Ruoxi to follow. Ruoxi followed behind silently with her suitcase. When she passed by Lin Manting, she heard the other party whisper, sister-in-law, the water in the door is deep, you have to be careful. There was a smile in her voice, but the laughter made people feel creepy when she heard it. Ruoxi didn't reply, but just accelerated her pace. She knew that none of the people here were simple. Lin Manting's words are a reminder on the surface, but in fact they are more like warnings. But she didn't have time to think about it because Uncle Zhang had already brought her to a room. Mrs. Young Madam, this is your room. The little one is in the corridor next door. If you have any needs, call me anytime. After Uncle Zhang said that, he turned around and left, leaving Ruoxi alone at the door. She opened the door, and the decoration in the room was so luxurious that it was amazing. Outside the huge floor-to-ceiling window was the back garden of the garden. The sun came in, but it couldn't make this place warmer. Ruoxi put down her suitcase and sat on the bed, finally couldn't help but breathe a long time. From today on, she is the young lady of the Lin family, but she knows in her heart that this identity is just a joke. The phone suddenly got up, and Ruoxi picked it up and saw that it was Su Shaoqing who called him. She pressed the answering button and heard the familiar voice of the other party. Ruoxi, have you arrived at the Lin family? How is that place? Is it particularly annoying to me? Ruoxi smiled reluctantly. Well, it's quite impressive, it's just, it doesn't look like home. She didn't say much, for fear that Shaoqing would worry. But how could Shaoqing not hear the depression in her verb? She immediately chased after her. Is someone bullying you? Don't be afraid, tell me, I'll go find you right away. It's okay, really. Ruoxi hurriedly said, just come just now, I'm a little unconventional. Don't worry, I can handle it. She knew that Shaoqing was the only person she could trust, but she didn't want to drag her friends into this pond. Even if she hasn't figured out the details of the Lin family, how can she let Shaoqing take risks? After hanging up the phone, Ruoxi lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. Her brain was full of the days before her father broke down. The company was suddenly reported for financial problems. The partner withdrew the capital, and the debtor went to the door to force the debt. The atmosphere at home was suffocating. She always thought that this was not simple, as if someone had deliberately pointed out their home, but she couldn't find out who it was. Now that she entered the Lin family, she concedes that the answer might be in this garden. But how easy is it to find the truth? The person named Tingchen was as cold as ice and had no chance to get her close. Lin Manting smiled softly on the surface, but her eyes were clear that she didn't treat her as her own person. There is also a sense of indescribable pressure everywhere, and the air seems to be filled with an indescribable sense of pressure. Ruoxi turned around, closed her eyes, and tried to relax herself. But the indifferent face of Gu Tingchen always appears in his brain, as well as Lin Manting's meaningful careful. She knew that this was just the beginning and the real challenge was still at the back. The next morning, Ruoxi was woken up by a knock on the door. She got up in a daze and opened the door and saw that Uncle Jean was standing outside the door, still with the cold and unhesitant expression on her face. "Mrs. Young Lady, please let you go downstairs for breakfast." Ruoxi clicked a little, washed up briefly, changed her clean clothes and left the building. In the restaurant, Gu Tingchen was already sitting in the main seat, holding a paper in his hand, without even raising his head. Lin Manting sat next to him, saw Ruoxi coming in, and greeted with a smile, "Sister-in-law, come here, sit here." Ruoxi sat opposite Lin Manting without saying anything. The table was filled with various breakfasts, including bread, milk, fried eggs, and several exquisite dishes, which looked like the standard of a five-star hotel. But Ruoxi had no appetite. She lowered her head and drank a sip of milk, feeling that everything seemed to be dreaming. "Brother Tingchen, there are a few bosses at home today, saying that they are looking at their new sister-in-law. You can help me at that time, and Ruoxi can't afford to pay for it," Lin Manting said with a smile, with a little talk in her voice, but Ruoxi heard a trial. She raised her head and looked at Tingchen, and found that he had not reacted at all, but just said coldly, "I'll say it later." Ruoxi's heart is tight, how can she be strong? She didn't even understand Tingchen, let alone what kind of strength she should deal with. But she knew that this kind of scene could not be avoided. None of the Lin family members are fuel-efficient lights, she has to be very energetic to avoid being caught. After breakfast, Gu Tingchen got up and left without saying anything more. Ruoxi looked at his back and couldn't tell what it felt like. She knew that this marriage was originally a deal, and he was not willing to treat her well, but this indifference still made her feel a little uncomfortable. "Sister-in-law, don't mind. Brother Tingchen is like this. No one can get up." Lin Manting walked over and patted her on the shoulder, smiling meaningfully, "But don't worry, with me here, no one dares to bully you." Ruoxi smiled reluctantly and did not answer. She knew that Lin Manting sounded like a comfort, but in fact, this woman probably hoped that she would be in trouble. How could the women in the wealthy door seem as simple as they appear on the surface? At noon, the head of the Lin family came indeed. A group of well-dressed middle-aged people walked into the hall, with a strong aura, and a look in their eyes. Ruoxi stood beside Gu Tingchen, greeting him with a hard head, saying polite words, and was so nervous in her heart. She could feel that the look of those people looking at her was like looking at a worthless design, full of disdain. "Tingchen, is this your new wife? It looks quite ordinary." A man in a dark blue suit spoke with a little contempt in his language. Ruoxi realized that this person was Gu Tingchen's second uncle, named Gu Mingfar, and heard that he had some authority in the Lin family. Gu Tingchen didn't answer the conversation, but just glanced at the other party coldly, as if he was disdainful of answering the questions. Ruoxi's heart sank, knowing that she had to deal with it. She smiled reluctantly and said, "Hello, Uncle Second, I am Lin Ruoxi. I just came to the Lin family and I still have a lot of things I don't understand. I'll ask you for advice in the future." Gu Mingchan hummed and said nothing, but that look, Ming didn't take her seriously. Ruoxi gritted her teeth and told herself that she could not show her timidity, but her heart still felt like she was blocked by something, which was hard to bear. At this moment, Lin Manting left and smiled and hit the scene. "Second uncle, Ruoxi has come just now, so she has to give her some time. Don't be too strict, so as not to scare people," she said, and blinked at Ruoxi, as if she was really talking to her. But Ruoxi knew that this woman wanted her to be so stupid. Now this good guy is like this, but she is just for others to see. In the next time, Ruoxi was like a puppet, following Gu Tingchen's wave after wave of success. Her face was almost freezing, but her heart was getting colder and colder. She knew that these people didn't recognize her at all, and even the seemingly politeness was maintained. But she had no choice but to force herself to hold on. After all, she was now the young lady of the Lin family, even if it was just a name. After finally sending away the last group of people, Ruoxi finally relaxed her voice. She returned to the room and sat on the bed, her brain full of eyes and words just like those people. She knew that this was just the beginning and the real challenge was still at the back. The Lin family is like a huge deep purity. Once she steps in, she will never be able to return to her head. But she can't retreat. The father's destruction, the mother's illness, and the contract, all of which force her to move forward. She had to find out the truth and figure out who harmed their family that year. And the answer to all these is likely to be hidden in a corner of Lin Jiazhuang. Ruoxi took a deep breath, stood up and walked to the window, looking at the back garden outside the window. Sunlight looked peaceful on the lawn, but she knew that every inch of land in this place might have unknown secrets. She clenched her fists and told herself, Lin Ruoxi, you can't be afraid. No matter what is ahead, you have to go on. At this moment, a sound of knocking on the door suddenly came from the door. Ruoxi was stunned, turned around, opened the door and found that Uncle Zhang was standing outside the door with a slightly solemn face. Mrs. Please go to the bookstore. Uncle Zhang's temperament was still so cold and hot, but Ruoxi heard something unusual from it. She clicked a little, and she felt a bad feeling in her heart. The book room was on the top of the main floor of the garden. Ruoxi followed Uncle Zhang through a long corridor, and her heartbeat was getting faster and faster. She didn't know what Gu Tingchen was looking for her to fuck her, but she just told her that this conversation would probably not be simple. Ruoxi stood at the door of the book room, her palms were sweating slightly, and the carved patterns on the door were so complicated that it made people dazzled, but she was not in the mood to appreciate these. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door, and a low voice came from it, "Come in." When I opened the door, the light in the book room was a little dim, and the thick window was half pulled, only a piece of sunlight was penetrated. Gu Tingchen sat behind a huge red wooden desk, holding a steel pen in his hand, writing something on a document. His face was half hidden in the shadows and looked colder than usual. Ruoxi stood at the door and did not dare to walk in directly, but just said lightly, "Mr. Guard, are you looking for me?" He didn't raise his head, and the sound of the pen tip on the paper was particularly clear. After a few seconds, he stopped his pen and raised his head, his eyes as cold as if they could hold on. "Sit." Ruoxi clicked a little, walked to the chair opposite the desk and sat down, put his hands on his knees, making himself look less tight as much as possible. But my heart was like beating a drum, and it was thunderous. She didn't know what Gu Tingchen suddenly came to her for, but she just told her that this matter was definitely not simple. "Today, you're still too good to be there." Gu Tingchen spoke, his temperament as if he was evaluating an item. "But, I have to tell you some things first. The Lin family is not the kind of place you think. None of the people here are fuel-efficient lights. If you want to stand calmly, it's not enough to just rely on a smile and politeness." Ruoxi was stunned, and she didn't expect him to say this. She bit her lip and replied in a low voice, "I know, I'll be careful." Gu Tingchen sneered, as if he had heard something funny, "Be careful? In the Lin family, 2 words are not to save you." He stood up, walked to the window, and looked at her with his back, his voice as if he had come out of his throat. "I don't care what you are going to enter the Lin family for, and I don't care what you have in your heart. But since you have signed a contract, you have to remember your identity. The young lady's name is not something you can use to set up." Ruoxi felt nervous and heard the warning in his words. She stood up and said, "She is a little bitch, I understand my position. I won't bother you, nor do anything out of place." He turned around, his eyes as if he could see through her thoughts. "I hope you can do it." After speaking, he decided to do it and reiterated, "Also, you shouldn't get too close to her from Lin Manting. Her mind is deeper than you think about it." Ruoxi was shocked, but he didn't expect that Gu Tingchen would take the initiative to mention Lin Manting. She clicked her head and didn't ask much, but her brain started to turn around. Is this a reminder to her, or does she have another purpose? Lin Manting is his cousin. Logically speaking, he shouldn't say the other party's bad words directly. But Ruoxi remembered Lin Manting's eyes with a smile again, and thought that Ling Chen's words might not be just talking nonsense. "Okay, go down." Gu Tingchen snatched his hands, as if he was not interested and said anything more. Ruoxi clicked and turned away from the book room. But when he walked to the door, he heard him say again in the back, "Remember, don't trust anyone." This sentence was like a stone slamming into Ruoxi's heart, making her walk for a while. She didn't turn around, but just silently closed the door and walked out of the bookroom. The corridor was empty, only her footsteps were reverberating. What does Tingchen mean? Don't trust anyone, including himself? Ruoxi's heart was in a mess, and she felt that this garden was becoming more and more like a huge mystery. Everyone said something and every move seemed to be playing chess, and she had not yet figured out the rules on the chessboard. Back in the room, Ruoxi sat on the bed, her brain was full of just conversations. She knew that Gu Tingchen was not the kind of person who would remind others without reason. He said that these were probably of some purpose. But she couldn't guess what he wanted to fuck. There is also Lin Manting. This woman made her feel unfavorable from the beginning. Now even Tingchen said this, Ruoxi's anxiety in her heart became even heavier. The phone suddenly slammed, and Ruoxi picked it up and saw that it was Su Xiaoqing's news. "Ruoxi, what's going on recently? The Lin family's helpers have not bullied you, right? I've always felt that I was not stubborn in the past few days. Why don't I go to find you and let's talk in person?" Ruoxi looked at the screen and felt warm in her heart, but immediately she slapped her head again. She knew that Xiaoqing was really concerned about her, but the Lin family was too dangerous and she couldn't let Xiaoqing roll and come in. So she replied, "I'm pretty good, don't worry. You're busy with yours, don't always worry about me." After sending the news, Ruoxi threw her phone around, lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling and staring at it. She knew that she could not be so passive all the time. In the Lin family, everyone has their own calculations. If she wants to stand firm and even find the truth about her father's destruction, she has to take the initiative to attack. But the problem is that she doesn't know where she starts. In the next few days, Ruoxi began to try to integrate into the Lin family's life. Every morning, she would go downstairs to have breakfast at any time. Although Gu Tingchen was not there most of the time, Lin Manting always sat there with a smile and chatted with her about homework. Ruoxi was obediently obeying this woman, but she was always on guard against this woman. Lin Manting's smile is so perfect that it makes people feel fake. She always mentioned Gu Tingchen without any hesitation, as if she wanted to try Ruoxi's attitude towards him, but Ruoxi was stupid every time and pretended not to understand. In addition to Lin Manting, other servants and housekeepers in the garden also had a subtle attitude towards Ruoxi. They called her young madam on their lips, but there was not much respect in their eyes. Ruoxi knew that these people probably thought that she was of ordinary origin and felt that she was not worthy of Gu Tingchen. But she didn't care about these things. She just wanted to find out the details of the Lin family as soon as possible and find the person who harmed her family that year. That night, Ruoxi finished her evening meal and returned to the room, and found a small paper on her door. She picked up and looked at it, and there were a few words written on it: "The garden behind, 10 o'clock, come see me." The words were sloppy and I couldn't tell who wrote it. Ruoxi's heart tightened, and his hand holding the paper shook slightly. She didn't know who stayed this, nor did she know what the other party was looking for her to fuck her, but she just told her that this matter was not simple. She hesitated for a long time and decided to go and take a look. After all, anything could happen in the Lin family. If she didn't go, she might miss some important thread. So she changed her inconspicuous clothes and put on her hat. When it was almost 10 o'clock, she sneaked out of the room. The back garden is on the west side of the garden. The air at night is a little cool. Ruoxi wrapped her coat tightly and walked along the path. The road lights in the garden are dim and the sound of croakers occasionally comes from the grassland, making this place even more distinctive. She walked to the agreed place and looked around, but she didn't see half of the figure. Just as I was wondering, a sound of footsteps suddenly came from behind. Ruoxi turned around suddenly and found out that the person coming was Lin Manting. She was wearing a black dress and her smile was still so gentle, but under this dim light, she looked a little scary. "Sister-in-law, it's too late. What are you fucking here alone?" Lin Manting asked with a smile, with a little talk in her language. Ruoxi's heart sank and said calmly, I can't sleep, so I'm out for a walk. Where are you? Why are you here too? Lin Manting smiled, walked to her, and said in a low voice, of course I am here to find you. She took out a photo from her pocket and walked to Ruoxi. Look at this, you should be interested. Ruoxi took the photo and looked down, and her heart suddenly shook. The person in the photo is her father, and the background looks like a meeting room. He is shaking hands with a middle-aged man in a suit. And that man, Ruoxi, recognized that it was Gu Tingchen's second uncle, Gu Mingfar. This is... Ruoxi raised her head and stared at Lin Manting, with a little trembling sound in her voice. Where did you get it? Lin Manting smiled deeper and wrote lightly, this is not important. What's important is that this photo can prove that your father's destruction that year was not related to the Lin family. How about it, sister-in-law, do you want to cooperate with me? I can help you dig out more. Ruoxi's brain was in a mess, holding the photo in her hand, almost crushing it. She knew that Lin Manting was not a kind-hearted person. This woman gave her photos with 80% of her own purpose. But this photo really made her feel moved. If she could get more traces from Lin Manting, maybe she could get close to the truth. How do you want to cooperate? Ruoxi gritted her teeth and asked, trying to calm down. Lin Manting smiled, approached her, and said in a low voice, it's very simple. You do something for me, and I'll help you check your dad's business. How to do it? I'll tell you a few days later. But sister-in-law, you have to think clearly that no one will help you in this place of the Lin family. I'm the only one who can help you. Ruoxi didn't say anything, but just looked at Lin Manting silently. There seemed to be two forces pulling in her heart, one was her desire for the truth, and the other was her distrust of Lin Manting. She knew that this woman was not that simple, but now, she didn't seem to choose. Okay, I'll take a look. Ruoxi finally opened her mouth, her voice so low that she could hardly hear it. Lin Manting was satisfied and turned away, leaving Ruoxi alone in the garden. The night wind blew over, carrying a biting chill. Ruoxi held the photo and her brain was full of her father's appearance when she was destroyed that year. She knew that she had been rolled into a bigger game, and Lin Manting was probably just the beginning. In the next few days, Ruoxi's heart was always very upset. She hid the photo in the room, but every time she saw the photo, she couldn't help but think of Lin Manting's smiling face. She knew that she could not fully trust that woman, but the content in the photo made her unable to think about it. At noon that day, Ruoxi was in the room and her mobile phone suddenly started to rise. She picked it up and saw that it was Su Shaoqing who called him. She hesitated for a moment, and then picked up, Shi-Qing, what's wrong? Ruoxi, why do you feel so tired when you hear your voice? Is the Lin family bullying you? Shaoqing's words were filled with worry. I told you that I have checked something in the past few days and found out that your father's birth was broken that year, which may have something to do with the Lin family. I found someone who worked with your father that year, and he said. Shaoqing, don't check it. Ruoxi suddenly stopped her, with a little anxious voice in her voice, this matter is too dangerous, don't come in. I can handle it myself. If you listen to me, don't worry about it. The phone was silent for a few seconds, and Shaoqing's voice fell, Ruoxi, I know you don't want to get tired of me, but how can I watch you suffer alone? We are friends, and we will bear it together if we have something to do. Don't force yourself. Ruoxi felt sad in her heart, almost unable to hold back her eyes. But she still gritted her teeth and said, Shi-Qing, I'm really fine. You believe me and I can handle it. If you really do it for me, don't check it again, okay? Shaoqing sighed and finally agreed, okay. Then you must tell me if you have something to do, don't hold it in your mouth. After hanging up the phone, Ruoxi leaned against the bed, her brain was as unrestrained as a group of numbness. She knew that Shaoqing was for her good, but the Lin family was too dangerous. She can't let Shaoqing take risks, even if she just checks the information, she may be targeted. At this moment, the door sounded again. Ruoxi was stunned and walked over to open the door. He found that Uncle Zhang was standing outside the door, his face more severe than usual. "Mrs. Please go to the bookstore and say there are important things to talk about." Ruoxi felt nervous, and he clicked a little, and followed Uncle Zhang to the bookroom. On the way, her brain kept turning around, guessing what Gu Tingchen was looking for her this time. Could it be that he knew about Lin Manting? Or did he find out that she was secretly investigating the Lin family? When he opened the book door, Gu Tingchen was still sitting behind the desk, his face as cold as ice. When his eyes swept over, Ruoxi felt as if she was staring at her. "Lin Ruoxi, I heard that you have been very close to Lin Manting recently." His voice was low and he was worried. "What did I tell you last time?" Ruoxi was shocked and quickly explained, I didn't get close to her, I just chatted a few times. She took the initiative to look for me, but I had no choice but to refuse." Gu Tingchen sneered, stood up, walked to her, his eyes as sharp as a knife. "Lin Ruoxi, I don't care if you are really stupid or stupid, but there are some things I don't want to hear again. If you are with Lin Manting again, you will bear the consequences yourself." Ruoxi lowered her head and did not dare to rebel, but she was filled with various emotions in her heart. She knew that Tingchen was a warning, but she also knew that she could not give up the ropes on Lin Manting. She is now like walking on a steel wire, with deep and purplish on both sides. If she is not careful, she will fall to pieces. "Okay, go down." Gu Tingchen snatched his hands, as if he was not interested and said anything more. Ruoxi clicked his head and turned away from the bookroom, but his heart was even more inconvenient than when he just came in. She knew that she had been stuck between Gu Tingchen and Lin Manting, and it was difficult to move forward and retreat. And the truth about the father's destruction is like a shadow hidden in the mist, so close that he can't even catch it. Back at the room, Ruoxi sat by the window, looking at the back garden outside the window. Her brain was full of the photo Lin Manting gave her. She knew that she could no longer be moved. Regardless of whether Tingchen warns him or Lin Manting has any purpose, she has to take the initiative to find the truth. That night, Ruoxi and others in the garden fell asleep and sneaked out of the room. She planned to go to the file room on the east side of the garden where Lin Manting said that there were documents from the Lin family for several decades, or maybe a trace could be found. The night was dark and the garden was scary. Ruoxi held the flashlight and carefully walked through the corridor, her heart beat as fast as if she was about to jump out of her throat. She knew that this was dangerous, but she didn't have any choice. If she doesn't take the initiative to attack, she will always be beaten. The door of the file room was locked, and Ruoxi took out a wire from her pocket and tried to pry the lock. This was something she learned from Shaoqing before, but she didn't expect that she would be on the stage now. After a few minutes, the door was finally opened. She pushed the door in, and there was a scent of Chen's paper coming over the noodles. She carefully searched for the documents and tried to find a trace related to her father's company. But there are too many documents, most of them are business contracts that cannot be understood. Just as Ruoxi was about to give up, she suddenly found an old paper in a drawer, which read, "The Lin Group is suspected of business fraud, which has led to the destruction of many companies." Ruoxi's heart beat faster and he looked carefully at the content on the newspaper. Although she did not mention her father's company directly, the time was worthwhile. She was about to plug the paper into her pocket when a sound suddenly came from the door. She turned off the flashlight suddenly and hid behind a table, her heart beat so fast that it was almost blowing. As his footsteps grew closer, the door was pushed open, and a beam of light swept in. Ruoxi held his breath, and there was only one thought in his brain: if he was discovered, it was over. The light swept around the room and finally stopped near the table. Ruoxi covered her mouth tightly, not daring to breathe even though she was so angry. She knew that she was like a trapped pet now, and if she was not careful, she would fall into a trap. And the owner of the light did not seem to plan to leave easily. Ruoxi curled up under the table, breathing carefully, for fear of making a sound. The light from the flashlight swept back in the file room, like a dog sniffing the breath of a pet. Her heart beats like a drumbeat, and there is only one thought in her brain: if you are caught, everything will be finished. The old paper in her hand was soaked by her, and the edges of the paper were almost soaked in sweat. The sound of his foot paused, and the light was frozen near the table, as if the man was hesitating something. Ruoxi bit her teeth tightly, staring at the gap under the table, and could only see a pair of black leather shoes, with the soles rubbing lightly on the floor, making a slight sound. Time seemed to be stretched out, and every second was suffocating. "Who is there?" A low voice sounded, carrying unquestionable pressure. Ruoxi was surprised and realized that this was the voice of Gu Tingchen. Why is it him? At the third update in the middle of the night, how could he come to the file room? Her brain was in a group, but she didn't dare to move, so she could only pray that he wouldn't really squat down to check it out. The light wave swayed again, and Tingchen seemed to have walked closer to the table. Ruoxi could almost hear her heartbeat, her palms were covered in sweat. She knew that if she was discovered now, not only would the incident of sneaking into the file room be exposed, but her intention to investigate the secrets of the Lin family would be seen through at first sight. By then, don't tell the truth, she will never have the opportunity to gain a foothold in the Lin family. At this moment, a sudden rush of footsteps came from outside, followed by Uncle Zhang's voice. "I just received a little bit of attention. I just received the phone and there was something wrong with the project in the east area. You need to go and deal with it immediately." Gu Tingchen cursed a low voice, paused his footsteps, and then moved the light from the table and towards the door. "I know, get the car." His words were impatient, but his steps finally moved away, the door of the file room was closed, and the room fell into darkness again. Only then did Ruoxi dare to breathe a sigh of relief, and she seemed to have been exhausted and sat down against the table legs. She waited for a few minutes and made sure that there was no silence outside, so she climbed out from under the table, holding the old paper tightly in her hand. That scene just now seemed like she had been shut up from the ghost gate, and she never wanted to experience it for a second time. She didn't dare to stay too long, so she stuffed the paper into her clothes, quickly sorted out the scene, and sneaked out of the file room. The night was still deep, and the corridor was strikingly quiet. Ruoxi lowered her head all the way, hiding from the security guards patrolling the rules, and finally returned to her room. The moment she closed the door, she really relaxed and sat on the ground with the door. Taking out the paper, Ruoxi looked carefully through the light of the bed light. Although the content on the newspaper is vague, it is clearly mentioned that a business fraud case of the Lin Group that year led to the destruction of several small and medium-sized enterprises. Although she did not directly name her father's company, her time and background are worthy. Ruoxi's heart seemed to be ignorant, and her anger and reluctance were intertwined, which made her almost unable to sit still. She knew that this paper was just the beginning, and the real evidence was hidden in a corner of the Lin family. But what happened tonight also reminded her how dangerous this road is. People have long been watching the appearance of Tingchen in the description of the file room. If she wants to continue checking, she must be more careful. In the next few days, Ruoxi pretended to be indifferent on the surface and continued to play the role of young lady, but her heart kept calculating what to do next. Lin Manting has not looked for her again for the past few days, as if she is busy with her own affairs, but Ruoxi knows that the woman will never let her go. And Gu Tingchen, since he almost ran into the file room that day, his attitude towards her seemed to be even colder, and he didn't even look at her for breakfast. That night, Ruoxi was sorting out her thoughts in the room, and her mobile phone suddenly started to get up. She picked it up and saw that it was Su Shaoqing who called him. She hesitated for a moment, and then picked up. "Shi-Qing, what's wrong?" "Ruoxi, you heard me. I know you didn't ask me to check, but I still couldn't help but check something." Shaoqing's voice sounded very urgent, with a little nervousness. "I found someone who worked with your father that year. He said that the Lin family deliberately set up a bureau that year and cheated several companies through fake contracts, and your father was one of them. Moreover, he also said that the backstage may be a leader of the Lin family. He didn't say who it was, but I think." "Shaoqing." Ruoxi suddenly slammed her, with anger in her voice. "Didn't I tell you not to care about this? Why do you still check it? The water here in the Lin family is too deep, and you will be in danger if you come in." The phone was silent for a while, and Shaoqing's voice lowered. "Ruoxi, I know you worry about me, but I feel so hard to bear when I see you suffering alone in that place. I just want to help you, really." Ruoxi felt a soreness in her heart and her eyes felt a little hot. She knew that Xiaoqing was sincerely doing her good, but because of this, she could not let Xiaoqing take risks. She took a deep breath and said, "Xiqing, I heard me, I can handle this myself. Don't check it again. If there is really something wrong, I will tell you. I'll answer me, can you do it?" Xiaoqing sighed and finally agreed, "Okay. Then be careful yourself. If you have anything to do, you must tell me." After hanging up the phone, Ruoxi sat on the bed, her brain was full of what Xiaoqing said just now. The Lin Family Establishment Bureau, fake contract, behind-the-scenes envoy. These information matched the newspapers in her hand, but she was still unlucky. She knew that she had to speed up, otherwise Xiaoqing would probably not consider her obstacles and continue to investigate. By then, the consequences would be unbelievable. At this moment, a sudden loud knock sound came from the door. Ruoxi was stunned and walked to the door to open. He found that Uncle Zhang was standing outside with an unusually solemn face. "Mrs. Please come here immediately and say there is something urgent." Ruoxi felt nervous, clicked a little, and followed Uncle Zhang to the main building. On the way, her brain kept turning around, guessing what Gu Tingchen was looking for her this time. Could it be that the file room matter was exposed? Or, what small move did Lin Manting do? When he opened the book door, Gu Tingchen stood by the window, facing her back, and a low pressure radiated from his body. Ruoxi stood at the door and did not dare to go in directly, but just said in a low voice, "Mister, are you looking for me?" He turned over, his eyes as cold as ice, and his voice was so low that it made people feel cold. "Lin Ruoxi, you'd better explain in good faith, what have you been fucking these days?" Ruoxi was shocked, but on the surface he still insisted, I don't have anything to do, I just stay in the garden, and I occasionally chat with Lin Manting." "What's wrong?" Gu Tingchen sneered, walked to the desk, took out a photo from the drawer and threw it in front of her. "What's going on?" Ruoxi looked down and her heart suddenly sank. The person in the photo is Su Xiaoqing. She is sitting in a cafe with a piece of paper in her hand, as if she is talking to whom? Ruoxi's voice buzzed in his brain and instantly understood what Gu Tingchen meant. He was warning her that Xiaoqing had been targeted. "Sister, this is my friend. She just came to see me, there was no other intention." Ruoxi gritted her teeth and explained, but her heart was already in a mess. She knew that Gu Tingchen was not the one who would warn him at will. Since he took out this photo, he showed that Xiaoqing might be in danger. "No other meaning?" Gu Tingchen said with a mockery, "Lin Ruoxi, I don't care who your friend is, or what she wants to fuck. But I warn you that not everyone can interfere in the Lin family. If you don't accept it, don't blame me for being rude." Ruoxi lowered her head and didn't dare to rebel, but she seemed to be tightened by something in her heart. She knew that Gu Tingchen was not saying this casually. If Xiaoqing was really rolled in because of her, she would not have imprisoned herself. "Okay, go down." Gu Tingchen snatched his hands, as if he was not interested and said anything more. Ruoxi clicked his head and turned away from the book room, but his heart was heavier than when he just came in. She knew what she had to do, otherwise Xiaoqing would be in danger. When he returned to the room, Ruoxi immediately called Xiaoqing. His lingering was filled with anxiety. "Xiqing, have you been followed recently? Have you found anything wrong?" Xiaoqing was stunned, then smiled and said, "No, I'm pretty good. Why did you suddenly ask this?" Ruoxi bit her lip and did not dare to tell the photo. She just said in a low voice, "You heard me, don't go out recently, and don't check the Lin family's affairs again. I will handle it here, don't worry." Although Xiaoqing was full of doubts, she still answered. Ruoxi hung up the phone and leaned against the bed, her brain was full of the photos thrown out by Gu Tingchen. She knew that this was definitely not done by Gu Tingchen alone, and there was probably a shadow of Lin Manting behind it. That woman had no good intentions from the beginning, and now she probably wanted to use Xiaoqing to threaten her. Ruoxi clenched his fist and decided that he could not be moved any longer. She must take the initiative to attack and find the certificate of the Lin family's establishment at that time, and at the same time protect the sunny day. And the only breakthrough may still be Lin Manting. The next morning, Ruoxi took the initiative to find Lin Manting and pretended to be Ruoxi. Manting, I have considered the cooperation you said last time. I can help you, but you have to tell me first, who did the destruction of my father that year? Lin Manting smiled and looked at her, with a smug look in her eyes. Sister-in-law, have you finally figured it out? Okay, I can tell you a little bit of a thread. The things that happened that year were indeed done by the Lin family. You have to check it yourself. However, I can give you a direction to ask for a long and clear question. He knows more than you think. Ruoxi was shocked, but she didn't expect that Lin Manting would directly call Ming Chang. She knew that this woman was probably not fully informed, but this was already an important thread. She clicked the head and pretended to be gratefully said, "Thank you, Manting. I'll check it out." In the next few days, Ruoxi began to secretly observe the direction of Ming Long. Although this man has a certain status in the Lin family, he has a strong personality and rarely appears in person. Ruoxi tried to approach him several times, but was taken away by his. Until this night, she finally blocked Gumming far away in the back garden of the garden. "Second uncle, I have something to ask you." Ruoxi walked over with a slight cautious expression in her language. Gu Ming turned far away, his eyes filled with impatience. "What's the matter? Say." Ruoxi took a deep breath and cut straight to the point. "I heard that my dad's company was broken that year, which was related to the Lin family. Do you know this?" The face of Ming Chang changed in an instant, and there was a panic flashing in his eyes, but it was soon covered by him. He sneered and said, "Little girl, don't listen to the wind as rain. How can you interrupt the Lin family? Go back and don't bother me." Ruoxi didn't move and continued to chase and ask, "Uncle Second, I just want to know the truth. If you know anything, tell me, I won't get tired of you." It was even harder to see the face of Ming. He said something in a low voice, then turned around and left. Ruoxi looked at his back and felt more certain that this person knew the inner feelings. She knew that she could no longer force herself, otherwise she would only be shocked. At this moment, Ruoxi's mobile phone suddenly started to activate. She picked it up and saw it was a strange number. She hesitated for a moment, and then picked up the phone, and a low voice came from the head of the phone. "Lin Ruoxi, if you don't want something wrong with your friend, come to the deserted warehouse immediately." Ruoxi was shocked and could hardly hold his phone. "Who are you? Why is Xiaoqing?" The other party did not answer and directly called. Ruoxi's brain was in a group, but she knew that she must pass by immediately. She quickly changed her clothes, sneaked out of the garden, and drove the taxi to the suburbs. When he arrived at the warehouse, Ruoxi opened the iron door of the storm, and it was so dark that it was almost impossible to see the road clearly. She took out the phone to light the light, and after walking a few steps, she heard a familiar voice. "Ruoxi, don't come. It's sunny." Ruoxi felt nervous and ran over with the sound. He found that Xiaoqing was being carried on a chair with a rubber strap on her mouth, and her face was astonishing as she looked white. Behind her, there were several men in black, one of which was Lin Manting's subordinate. "Sister-in-law, you're here very quickly." Lin Manting walked out of the shadow. Her smile on her face was still so gentle, but her eyes were filled with coldness. "I've said a long time ago that no one will help you in the Lin family. If you don't listen, don't blame me now." Ruoxi gritted her teeth, and her voice was filled with anger. "Lin Manting, what do you want to fuck? Let Xiaoqing go, this matter has nothing to do with her." Lin Manting smiled and slammed her head. "Let her go? That won't work. She is your only soft rib. If I don't hold her, why would you force you to hear it? Tell me, I'll hand over all the things in your hand, otherwise, I can't guarantee that she can go back intact." Ruoxi's heart sank, knowing that Lin Manting was talking about the newspaper she took from the file room. But she also knew that if she handed over something, Xiaoqing might not be safe. She clenched her teeth and tried to delay time. "I don't have anything in my hand, what you want, just say." At this moment, the gate of the warehouse was suddenly knocked open, and a group of people rushed in, and the leader was Gu Tingchen. Lin Manting's face changed, but she still made a strong appearance. Brother Tingchen, why are you here? This is just a little misunderstanding. I'm just joking with my sister-in-law. Joker? Gu Tingchen sneered and signaled the person behind him to step forward. Take the person away, I will explain this to the boss clearly. Lin Manting's men were quickly subdued, and Xiaoqing was also untied. Ruoxi hugged her and her eyes fell down. Xiqing, you're okay, right? I'm sorry, I'm tired of you. Xiaoqing slammed her head and said, I'm fine, Ruoxi, don't be responsible. Gu Tingchen walked to Ruoxi and said in a low voice, I will deal with this matter, you can take her back first. Ruoxi clicked a little and helped Xiaoqing leave the warehouse. When he looked back, Gu Tingchen was staring at Lin Manting coldly, his eyes filled with complex emotions. She knew that this time, Tingchen would not let Lin Manting go easily, but she knew in her heart that the grudges of the Lin family were not only so simple on the surface. A few days later, Lin Manting was sent out of China by Gu Tingchen. On the surface, it was studying, but in fact everyone knew that this was a distorted exile. And Ruoxi finally forced some truth from that year from Gunming Chang'an. It turned out that the establishment of the bureau ruined her father's property that was done by Gunming Chang and Lin Manting's father, in order to swallow up the assets of several small and medium-sized enterprises. The truth is revealed, and Ruoxi has not much joy in her heart. Although it has been revenge, the price of all these is too high. Xiaoqing was shocked by this incident and something almost happened. And there was an insurmountable crack between her and Gu Tingchen because of this grudge. That night, Ruoxi stood on the platform of Linjiawen, looking at the night view far away, feeling empty in her heart. Gu Tingchen walked to her, was silent for a long time, and finally opened his mouth. Ruoxi, I don't know what happened that year. If I had discovered it earlier, maybe. It's okay. Ruoxi stopped him, his voice very lightly. The past has passed. I just want to ask you, how many secrets do the Lin family have in the current Lin family? Gu Tingchen did not answer, but just looked at her silently, with a burst of pain in his eyes. Ruoxi smiled and turned back to the room. She knew that there were some answers that Gu Tingchen would not say, and she didn't want to ask any more. A few days later, Ruoxi packed her luggage and decided to leave Lin's house. She knew that this place did not belong to her, and she did not want to be swallowed by this purity again. Gu Tingchen did not try to keep her, but just sent her to the door silently, with his eyes full of disgust. Ruoxi, if one day you want to come back, there will always be your place here. His voice was very low, as if he was afraid of being heard by whom. Ruoxi smiled, without saying a word, just pulled the suitcase and walked out of the gate of the garden without looking back. The sun was shining on her body, warm, making her feel as if she had finally woken up from a nightmare. The road ahead is still long, but at least, she is no longer the pawn that was beaten. Behind him, Gu Tingchen stood at the door, looking at her back with a complex look, holding a small ring in his hand, which had not been relaxed for a long time.